everyone, I'm coming to you from my bookshelf today because I have a ton of Star Wars books on this side and a ton of religious biblical books on this side, and then a sort of jumble on the bottom. And I think that's really indicative of who I am as a person. I identify as religious, but I'm also very much a participant in and a consumer of culture, whether that's pop culture or nerd culture or a little bit of both. So when I first discovered the Weaning Diverse Books movement, I thought it was brilliant because it's so important for the identities you hold to be visible and represented in the culture you're consuming, whether it's your sexual orientation or your race or your ethnicity or a multitude of other things. And I think when you start to talk about diversity, it's important to consider religious diversity as well, because it's a huge part of my identity and I don't often see it represented in the books that I read. Sometimes there are religious secondary characters, and sometimes the protagonist identifies as a member of a religious group but doesn't really hold any of the beliefs or practice it in a meaningful way, so if religion is mentioned at all, it's usually not central to the story. So I thought I'd share some notable young adult books that really grapple with what it means to be religious, specifically Jewish, but I'll include some other religions as well. Playing with Matches, in my experience, is one of the most accurate portrayals of what it means to live in a Jewish community and go to a Jewish school and just be a Jewish teenager. In the book, Raina Resnick discovers that she has a knack for matchmaking, for successfully setting people up on dates who are interested in dating for marriage. Raina's family is pretty strict and has high expectations of her, but they're also really lovable characters, which I think is a really tricky balance to pull off, so kudos. It's also really funny, and I'm usually good at predicting plot twists, but there were some genuine surprises in here for me. I will say that the plot feels a little manufactured at times, like everything's falling into place too neatly, and the voice can sound a little bit immature, and especially the length reads more middle grade than young adult. But she is in high school, so technically it is young adult, and it's just a quick, easy, fun, light book. Nevermind the Goldbergs is an incredibly quirky book. There's really nothing else out there like it. It's about a girl named Chava, who is an Orthodox Jewish actress, and she lands a role on this new TV show called The Goldbergs, about a Jewish family. She moves out to Hollywood to be in the show, and like Raina in Playing with Matches, Chava is more of a worldly character, so she was more relatable to me. Also, that means the book is less about portraying this cult-like society like some of the other books we'll get to, and it's just about a girl trying to figure out who she is amid these crazy changes that are happening in her life. And I like that Chava isn't a shrinking violet. She's impulsive, she's headstrong, she sort of makes things up as she goes along, which I feel like you don't really see in religious characters a lot. A lot of times girls especially are portrayed as these good, perfect little girls, and maybe they rebel, maybe they don't, but she's just doing her thing and she rocks. Like No Other definitely delves into the community, almost cult-like aspect. First of all, just judging the book by its cover, clearly an Eleanor and Park wannabe, but this actually turns out to be more Romeo and Juliet. It involves a Hasidic girl, Devorah, and a non-Jewish African-American boy, Jackson, who get stuck in an elevator together and become friends and then eventually fall for each other. Like No Other does lean on some negative stereotypes about religious people in order to create tension, specifically Devorah's brother-in-law, who treats her sister terribly, and I would hate for people to read this book and think that that's how all Jewish men treat their wives, because blah. I guess every story needs a villain, and he's a very effective one, but aside from that, the writing is excellent. It's told in dual perspectives from both Devorah and Jackson's points of view, and it really draws you in. And finally, I'm saving the worst for last here because I'm sorry, this book is ridiculous. It's called The World Outside, and it follows Chani, who is also a Hasidic Jewish girl living in Crown Heights, who wants to be a singer. Being a singer isn't really a career option in her world, but she meets a boy named David at the mall who encourages her to follow her dreams and apply to Juilliard, and spoiler alert, she gets in. But you have to suspend your imagination in order to believe that she does. She can't read music. She shows up to her Juilliard audition without anything prepared, and then she sings a Hasidic niggin and gets a standing ovation from the admissions counselors. So not only is the plot of this book problematic, but I think that the portrayal of Hasidic Judaism is also really problematic and just inaccurate. Chani's family is sexist and racist and homophobic and violent sometimes, and I spend a lot of time in Crown Heights. I have great friends there, and I did not identify with this at all. At least in Like No Other, which is the other book set in Crown Heights, Yes, there are some unpleasant moments and unpleasant characters, but overall, the book strives to paint a nuanced, complex picture of life in Crown Heights. When you have Devorah and Jackson falling in love and these two worlds colliding, the world outside doesn't put in that effort. So this is an example of YA and religion gone totally wrong, in my humble opinion. These next two books are not about Judaism, but they still deal with religion in interesting ways. So the first one is Things I Can't Forget, which is about a girl named Kate who has a falling out with her friend Emily when Emily gets pregnant. And then when Kate works at a summer camp and starts falling for another counselor, she realizes that waiting till marriage is not as easy as it seems. I love the first line of this book, which is, "Girls like me do not buy pregnancy tests." That makes me want to keep reading. It also explores that tension of when one friend is devoutly religious and one friend is devoutly not. And that is something you really don't see often. And finally, I know this next one is around my room somewhere, but I cannot find it for the life of me. So bam, there's a picture of the cover. It's called Does My Head Look Big in This? In the book, Amal decides to start wearing the hijab, a Muslim headscarf, when she comes back from winter break, and the story chronicles the reactions of her family, her friends, her crush, her principal, and of course, Amal's own religious journey. I love how Amal is inspired to wear the hijab from an episode of Friends. I think that's hilarious, and sort of goes with the theme that I look for in books of characters who are deeply religious but also have a foot in the world. And even though I don't wear a headscarf, there are places where the way I dress sticks out. I definitely related to her struggling to feel self-confident when she's feeling really self-conscious at the same time, even though she really believes in what she's doing. I think that I'm less critical of books that aren't about Judaism, A, because I'm less defensive about them, and B, I don't necessarily know when something is portrayed inaccurately because I'm just not in those worlds. I'm not as intimately familiar with other religious communities as I am with my own. If there are other YA books that talk about religion in meaningful ways that I didn't talk about, please leave them in comments because I'd love to read them. And if you want to stay updated on all the things I'm reading, you can follow me on Twitter @nerdwithavoice, and I attach my Goodreads page to my Twitter account. So anytime I add a new book and write a little review of it, it goes to my Twitter. So I'd love to hear from you on there also. Thanks for watching.
If I let myself fall, if I let myself fall,